So in today's video, I want to talk about the idea of regional teams, local teams, and mercenaries and being a merc. And kind of the way that I've seen the culture evolving in the last couple of years in armored combat fighting. And again, I've only been doing this now for not even 3 years, but I've also talked to a lot of people who've been here for a long time and kind of seeing some of the changes and interesting things that are happening and really helping people to develop different mindsets towards fighting on teams and what that means to be on a team. So I will say, first caveat is I live in New England. We have one of the largest, if not the largest community of fighters regionally of anywhere in the country, right? There are definitely other really strong centers of armored combat fighting. I think, Nashville's growing right now. I can think of, and then Texas, with the Dallas Warlords are clearly big. There's a lot of other teams too, and they're not just slipping my mind right now. But the point being, like in New England, just in general, we have a lot of people participating on some level in armored combat. At the Knights Hall in Nashville in particular, we have multiple teams, and we're constantly growing, and there are other teams around us, other groups that are growing. So we have a lot of people that if you want to fight, you can find a match. A lot of the country doesn't have that. So one of the things that I think is really interesting is a lot of times we talk, people who are really involved in this, who live in the areas with lots of fighting, we talk about teams very regionally, right? I mean, my regional team is New England Executioners. That's who we are, right? My local team is the Nashville Nightmares, right? So they are town-specific based, they're region-specific based, and generally everyone who fights in that belongs to that area. You live in that region, right? And that makes sense. You're training with the same guys, you're traveling with the same people. You're training and you're knowing your team, so of course you're going to fight, and that's how you're going to build the teams off where you live. And that generally works pretty well. If you live in an area with a lot of people, you're going to build a team around the people who want to fight. You're going to build your skills, and you're going to get pride in fighting for your local area. It's how sports teams work, right? Like, I'm in, again, New England, so like the Boston Celtics, yay, go Boston. Like, I'm in this area, therefore I like them. That's how we all kind of function. But I think that for the sport to continue to grow, we have to think too along the lines of building teams in different formats. And I've seen actually Dallas do this a little bit. Craig Ivey, it comes to mind, who doesn't live in Dallas, who lives in the West Coast, I believe. And he was on the Dallas Warlords. He built a rapport with them. He became friends with them, and he travels regularly to Dallas to train, from what I've seen. And because of that, he's part of the team. So when they go to big events, he's there, right? And this idea that you can be part of a team without being local is a thing that I think we need to talk about a little more or expand upon. I think there's some real risks with that, though, and that is you're looking at the people I've seen who are doing that are generally competitive, high-level fighters who've already built their skills and have an ability to train on their own and maybe even have their own small training crew, and they connect with a larger, bigger team and they fight with them, right? So I think that's wonderful, and I think that's the thing we should be looking at. There's nothing wrong, say, if you have to be in a certain area to be on that team. If you build a connection with that group and they welcome you in, then you should fight with them. But I do think that we want to be cautious with recommending that many people do that. I think that generally speaking, the best way to grow your sport is to grow it regionally and locally, right? And because it's just like any sport, to get a bunch of great athletes, you have to go through a bunch of people who want to come and participate, right? You've got to get, if you look at those sports that are huge in America, if you look at basketball, NBA, right? How many millions of kids in the country are playing basketball in their local school team, their regional team, their travel team, and a few of those go to the bigger teams and travel, maybe AAU across the country, and a few of those go to the college, and a few of those go to the NBA, right? So that's how you get to your best athletes. So you got to build a small, localized culture of fighter. I think that's very important. So if you want to grow the sport, if that's your goal, then build it local. If you want to compete at a higher level and you don't have that community around you, then network with other communities and become part of their culture and hopefully part of their team. And that leads me to the idea of merking. So I'm really torn on this in some ways, in that I really like being part of something. I love being part of the New England Executioners. I love being part of something that I had to try and earn and get to that, right? And now that's part of my identity as far as who I am in some ways, right? Like I train a lot. Fighting is a big part of my life, and I love being an executioner. I feel like if I was in Dallas, I'd be fighting to be part of the Warlords, right? If I, was Cincinnati, I'd want to be the Barbarians. Like, that's their team. I want to be part of the thing that's local to me. That's really important to me as an individual. So I think that we really want to continue a culture of building local, building people up and developing their skills. With that said, if you want to compete at a higher level, you want to do international competition, and I think this is the most important part, if you don't have the people around you, I think that's where Merking becomes really important. There are individuals I can think of who all over the country don't have a team. They don't have a culture, right? And it might be because of distance. Like I said, New England's very condensed compared to some of the, if you go to the Midwest and everything's far apart, right? It can be much harder to get people together with that. So it's about capacity for fighters. And it's about having someone who has the time, treasure, and willingness to commit to building a facility, building a gym, finding the time, finding the practice space, right? Like, not everyone can do that. And I'm fully aware of that. And I say it from my own personal experience that I'm lucky to be in New England. I don't have the time to be a captain or to build a team. Like, I'm not going to do it, right? Like, I am so thankful other people are doing it. I'm so thankful for the Knights Hall and Jay for existing. I'm thankful for Mikey Johnson building and Kayla for building the Reavers up in Maine. That's a new team that's been growing. I'm watching them grow. But Mike, they're putting a lot of work into finding locations and training and building a culture. And like, I don't have time for that. So I'm thankful I have it. If I didn't have that, I'd probably be looking to Merc. And what is Merking? So Merking is basically finding teams that need bodies, right? Finding teams that need fighters and participating with them. And the interesting thing, and the reason I brought this up, I was talking recently to a friend of mine, Eric, who just changed the name from his team to the Salem Free Company with the idea of building a mercenary team. And I thought that was really interesting. And I don't know what they're gonna do with it, where it's gonna go. But they went from trying to build the small local community team, and from my understanding, and Eric can jump here and leave a comment and correct me if I'm wrong. From my understanding, like, they were trying to build a local team, and they were having a hard time growing it. Right, there weren't a lot of fighters. There was a small core who were passionate, and they actually traveled to Reno, and some of them worked with other teams because they didn't have enough fighters to build their own team. But they said, okay, like, if we can't do it this way, let's go to the kind of theory of the mercenary company, where we invite anyone in who wants to fight with us, and we travel to things. We just bring people with us who want to participate. And I think there's space for that in the community, along with the regional and local teams, to help build up fighters specifically who don't have a big community and space to train. So like I said, if I were to go, if I were to be in an area and Eric were to reach out and say, hey, like, we got an event, I know you're out this way this weekend. Do you want to participate? And I'd say, yeah, great. I'll Merc with you. I'll hop in and fight with you guys. And I think that's really important to have that. I think where it gets a little confusing is then when you get to like championships and tournaments, and you're saying like, oh no, we're the, if I said we're the New England Executioners, like, that's who we are. We built this culture. We bring in our team to it, and then we came there, and 8 of our 12 fighters were not from that area and not trained with us. We just went and cherry picked best people off other teams. I think there's some risk there. I think it's a growing risk. We see it with all sports, that eventually you have to kind of define your teams. And define your limits and how many people you can have from out of different areas. And I think we'll get there eventually, but we're not there yet. So right now, the big goal is to grow, and you grow by building local and getting at base as big as you can with a number of fighters. Everyone from people who just want to learn soft kit to what I'll call beer league fighters. Like, that's not a negative term. If people just want to jump in and fight sometimes, to semi-competitive, to as competitive as we have right now. Like, you want that whole range. You want to build that huge culture in your area. And then you want to branch out and help Merc with other groups and send people to other teams as available. And if you don't have any of that, then you want to be a Merc and build and find communities. Reach out to people. Everyone is looking to grow this. So if you reach out and say, hey, like, I'm 4 hours from you. I can't travel regularly, but I'd love to meet with you guys once a month. And can maybe Merc for a couple local things. Most teams will pick you up in a heartbeat. They'll say, yeah, that'd be great. We want more people. Join in. That's awesome. I got my little dog down here. So I think that's kind of the point, is like, we need to build a community in that way. I do foresee us eventually needing to do some sort of ranking system, but I don't think we're there yet. And this comes out of, before this sport, I played competitive paintball, tournament paintball. And there they actually have classes of in their tournaments. They changed it recently, so I don't know exactly what it is now, but it's basically a 1 through 5. So you'd say, the 5 being the lowest league, 1 being the pro league, right? And when you build a team, you actually have to build your team out of players that are primarily ranked in that same level, right? And the way your rank goes up is it goes up by wins and also participation. And there's a formula for it. Actually, every player has their own ID card through the system. And whenever they participate in a sanctioned tournament of any kind, they scan their card, it updates automatically their ranking over time to get points towards it. So what that does is it means that you can't sandbag an event. You can't say I'm a level 5 team and bring in all level 1 and 2 people and then just blow people out of the water and win it, right? You have to bring in people who are at that same level. The formula is pretty complex. I don't know if it's perfect. I think there's still some problems with it. But overall, the concept is solid in that saying, hey, if you participate long enough, you will move up from like the beginner level 5 to a 4, maybe even to a 3. Then it kind of caps you out until you've won certain events or certain points and things like that. But that way, individual players have a ranking, and then in tournaments have a ranking, and their teams have to be built within that. I think the formula is something like, on your team, if you were in a level 4 event, you could have anyone in 4 and 5, and you could have 2 players that were level 3 or something like that. So if someone like ranked out of your team, they could still participate a little bit, at least for that season usually, and then they go try out for another team at the higher level, and that's kind of how the sport got built. So you see a lot of teams, they have their own divisions within their own. If they're big enough, they might have their own 5, 4, 3, 2 team. That's in the bigger areas of paintball. In the smaller areas, there might be, hey, we've got 1 5 teams, we've got 1 2 teams for the whole area, and like you try out, and then if you have enough people who don't make it, then you build your own team and you go play as a 2 team, and that's kind of keeps the sport growing that way. So I do foresee someday we need something like that. We need to figure out like, how do we, if we have just Murking where everybody comes in and we say, hey, we're going to build the best super team every tournament, and you change your name, that's not great. But I think that we're far away from needing to worry about that right now. We're still at that point of the goal is to grow it. You grow it through regional, local building a culture, community, events. Like I said, New England has been fantastic at that. Like we have an event, my God, like almost every weekend right now, like every other weekend. We have classes, at least in Nashville, like I say, we have classes 5 days a week, right? The training, like that's amazing. And people drive about an hour and a half is kind of the circle of where most people are driving. You might have some for classes, and for driving for fights, it's 4 hours. I think is kind of the circle of people coming. I know Maine's building there, so Boston's starting to build their own out too. So with that, kind of growth, what we're seeing is more and more local fights, more and more events, more and more community, and the goal being, at least in our area, is giving people lots of things they can do without lots of travel. Because travel gets expensive, the most expensive part of the sport. Then the people who want to travel, who want to participate in the bigger events, they can simply do that. They can simply go with their team, the executioners, or we have our next team down called the headsmen, which is, I guess, A and B team, but I hate doing that. But whatever, the other team's the headsmen, and they'll travel to other events. But that gives you the local fight if you want, gives you the travel fighting. And then the thing that we don't have a lot of on top of that is we don't have a lot of Merking right now, in the sense of people from other areas coming in. I think that's mostly because we have so many people to pull from. But we're still open to this conversation. We have a great person who wants to come and become part of the community. Yeah, come talk to me, man. Like, come meet with us. Fly out here once and train, right? Like, let's continue to grow. And I think the idea of having a Merc company, like Eric is doing with the Salem Free Company, is really interesting, where it's a space for people to go who don't have a place to go. A space to build a community for a team across the nation who's saying, hey, like, we don't have a community, we don't have a local team. Or maybe we do, and they're just not big, and they only fight, once every few months. I want to be more of this, and that gives a space for it. So I love the idea of these kind of Merc companies popping up, these large regional areas popping up, and then everything in between. So that's kind of my thoughts on the state of armored combat right now in the U.S., looking at primarily Armored Combat Sports League, but also HMB overall, what I know of that from the people I've talked to. So give me your thoughts, comments, anything anything you like about it. If you have other things you'd like me to share or make make videos about, let me know. I've been told right now that the link to my store is not working, but I'm going to put it down there anyway. So if you want to purchase merch, check it out. I'm going to try to get that updated and see if it's working for it. So thank you very much and have a great day.